As many of you know, I do have a podcast here on the channel. However, it is something that I haven't really done for a little bit, so I have been slacking on that. It is called Chronic Heart to Heart, and the reason I started the podcast was to connect with other people with chronic illness to help you share your stories. So let's talk about podcasting and what that kind of entails. So podcasting is something that is very fascinating to me, and it's something that I have always wanted to do. I have created different podcasts over the years, and some of them have definitely fallen flat, which is mostly because of the inconsistency of uploading the content. If you want to start a podcast, as an example, if say it's about chronic illness and you want to share your journey, or you want to help other people share their journeys, or maybe you want to have a podcast about films and maybe you're really passionate about horror films. Well, the reason I say that is because of my background, obviously. But who knows? Maybe your podcast is about art. Maybe it's about video games. The thing is, having a good podcast is something that takes time, energy, effort, and planning. You can just sit in front of your camera and do a vlog style kind of video, like what I do as an example, and sit here and just do that talking head kind of thing, or you can have a co-host. So when you're doing a podcast, it's sitting down and figuring out which direction you want to go. Do you want to be the sole podcaster? Would you like to have a co-host? Is there good banter between you and the co-host? So this podcast is mostly about podcasting and what to do for that. So let's get into it, shall we? It's coming up with an idea. What is your idea for your podcast? Pick that podcast idea and then sit down and write down a series of episodes. What kind of content it is will depend on what kind of episode list you create. Creating your episode list is simple. Once you have your idea, write down various topics that fall under that umbrella of that idea. So for me, as an example, I am chronically ill, and I do tend to talk about that quite a bit, especially here on this channel, expressing my dislike or my like for things, how I feel isolated at times, the frustration that comes along with being chronically ill, but also the joys that I've found by being sick, which may sound a little odd to most, but it is something that I like to talk about because illness is not a death sentence. So I have both sides of the coin, so to speak, that we talk about on the podcast. And when I have other people on the podcast, which I haven't for a bit, but I'm hoping to eventually get back into that here soon, is asking them what's going on in their life. What is their life with illness like? What kind of challenges do they face? Having a set list of questions to ask someone you're interviewing is also important to that aspect of the interview. Because if you just go in blind and you wing it, sometimes you get some great questions and you have some good banter with someone that you've just met, but other times there can be a lot of dead air and that can be a little problematic. You can definitely go back in and edit that and that kind of thing. So let's talk about editing. Editing is another thing that you have to do when you have a podcast. You can do a single shot talking head kind of video, or dual shot talking head video, or whatever you prefer. But editing out those ums, ers, and buts, and those long drawn out pauses where nobody's talking definitely makes the podcast flow a lot better. So I may be a bit of a novice when it comes to podcasting, but I'm definitely doing my best to understand the editing process as well as how to interact with the people that I interview. So when I do interviews, because of my situation, I tend to do them over Zoom, which is a online platform where you can have a video call. You can do it over Skype. Zoom allows you to record your call, which I think is a phenomenal thing, and it's definitely very helpful for someone like me. So I will sit here, and then the other side of the screen will be the other person, or it can be a stacked kind of view, but usually I like the split screen idea of us both being next to each other. And then we just ask each other questions, or we just talk. A big part of my podcast is to talk about illness, but also to have that person talk and share about their illness. People with chronic health problems do have more to them than just being chronically sick. We've covered a couple different things here. We've covered the picking your topic and then moving into talking about the different kind of episode lists you want to make. So, pros and cons essentially of like chronic illness would be a good example of some of my list that I started before I started the podcast. Then sourcing some interviewees, people that I want to have on the podcast for them to talk about their illness. And there's some people that I'd like to revisit on that front because I ended up getting a little sick. A couple of the things that we've covered so far. We have talked a little bit about editing, and editing is one of those things that the more that you do, the better you'll get at it. So it is something that does take time. The videos that are put out on the internet, whether it's my channel, other people's channels, if it's not just a stream of consciousness kind of video, they generally have been edited and spliced together. One of the kinds of editing things that is very popular on YouTube is actually called jump cutting. So jump cutting is a form of editing where you basically just take like a section of video and you cut out like the ums, ers, or buts like I was talking about before, and then you take the next part of that and you put it together. So it would make it so that there's no ums, ers, or buts, and then the video would flow a lot better. But you would be seeing the jump cuts because you'd be going from someone maybe static and facing the camera, and then the next thing their head is facing a different way. So that's an example of a jump cut. You can also put music to your videos. One thing with YouTube, as an example, is if you don't own the rights to the music, or if you haven't got your music from somewhere like artlist.io, which is where I generally get my music from, which is the music I have in the background playing on stream or playing on my YouTube channel. It's music that I basically purchase for the purpose of using it on social media platforms. Artlist.io is great. It can be a little bit expensive. It is something that I started using though because of my documentary film that came out, or is coming out, excuse me. And that has really helped me in that department with music and putting background music into my videos and not getting copyright strikes for it. So I would suggest using something like that. There are free platforms as well where you can find music, but I don't have any of those names on hand, so I'll probably cut that part out. So if you do end up using videos, music, I would recommend artlist.io as an example. Like I said, it can be a little pricing. It is a yearly fee that you pay. You can also use a lot of their video footage from there as well and integrate that into your content. I haven't done that so much with YouTube as I've been quite busy with school lately, but I was hoping to kind of integrate some of that stuff into my content, so hopefully I'll get there eventually. So there is quite a bit of stuff to do when it comes to podcasting. It's not just sitting down and talking into a camera. There's a lot of planning that goes into it. And that plan that you set as like the bone structure of your podcast can help you bring the podcast together and create episodes that you feel proud of. Ones that you can put out on the internet and other people see and can perhaps relate to, or get some comedic and people can get comedic relief from the stuff that you're putting out there as well. So there is that. I would definitely encourage you, if doing something like podcasting is something that you're interested in, to do more research and enjoy the process. It is going to take time, like anything that you put out online, and sometimes the stuff that we put out there doesn't pop off right away, and it takes time, dedication, and work, but it's also the process. It's the journey of going through the process of creating something that you're proud of, that you're excited to share, and you can leave your lasting mark on the world. So thank you so much for joining me for my video about podcasting and what podcasting would look like if you got started. And while I am still a novice podcaster, I guess I know a little bit about podcasting. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you like. No pressure to do so. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.